Mossad, Israel's foreign intelligence service, is legendary in the world in which it lives. Its full name is Mossad Merkazi, le-Modiin, ule-Takfidim, Meyuhidim, or Central Institute for Intelligence and Special Operations. The service was born a little over a year after the founding of the State of Israel on May 14, 1948. Most of its original members were Israeli Sabras, Jews born in Israel, or as it was known before 1948, the British Mandate for Palestine, and Holocaust survivors who poured into the area after the end of World War II. Mossad and the people within it, then and today, have one primary public purpose: to protect the State of Israel. The other well-known but unstated purpose is to protect Jewish people in Israel and abroad. To do that, Mossad has carried out some incredible operations. Some have made headlines, some will never be known, and many likely cross the line into illegality, at least as far as much of the world is concerned. Assassinations, kidnapping, physical and psychological torture, and more are all accusations that have been leveled at Mossad, sometimes by Israel's allies. Welcome to History on Fleek. Today we'll be telling you about the Mossad, its history, and some of its most famous and controversial operations. Mossad was founded formally in December 1949. Before that, the Jews who wished to establish a Jewish state in what was known as Palestine relied on skilled men and women in the various Jewish guerrilla groups who had been fighting the Palestinians and sometimes the British for years. The biggest group was the Haganah, Hebrew for defense, and it was established following a Palestinian uprising against the British and the minority Jews of the Mandate from 1936 to 1939. The history of the conflict between the Jewish and the Palestinian people is long, millennia long, but the conflict had been on hold to a degree since the Romans dispersed the Jewish people from their homeland around 70 AD following another Jewish uprising against Roman rule. You may have heard the term diaspora when referring to the Jewish people who had been forced to leave their homeland. The term is also used for other groups who have been forced, either by force or economics, to leave their homeland. In the late 1800s, Theodor Herzl, an Austro-Hungarian Jewish journalist, and others began the movement called Zionism, which called for a Jewish homeland in Palestine. By the early 1930s, a considerable number of European Jews, motivated by both the promise of their own state and the rising tide of anti-Semitism in Europe, had arrived in Palestine. There were already a small number of Jews living there, but for the most part, their numbers were what kept them safe. They were generally regarded by the Palestinian Arab majority as little threat. That changed when boatloads of Jews began to stream into the area in the 1930s, and again after World War II. Before and during the war, the Jews and the Palestinians of the British Mandate waged a vicious guerrilla war against each other, which in 1948 blew up into a regional conflict after the British Mandate came to an end. The Israeli War of Independence, what many Arabs call the catastrophe, pitted the Jews against Egypt, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon, as well as the Palestinians, and ended in an Arab-Palestinian defeat. The intelligence wing of the Haganah was largely made up of amateurs, though a core of experienced fighters from former European intelligence operatives assured that the amateurs would learn fast. The first president of Israel, David Ben-Gurion, ordered the formation of the Mossad after realizing that the Haganah was not made up of professionals, but many skilled amateurs who would return to their civilian lives when the war was over. He and many others realized that in order to be prepared for the inevitable next attack on the new country and its citizens, a full-time intelligence service was needed. Mossad is one side of a formidable intelligence triad. The other sides are Shin Bet, the domestic counterintelligence and counterterrorism agency, and Amman, the military intelligence of the IDF, or Israeli Defense Forces. It did not take long for Mossad to establish themselves as one of the most effective intelligence services in the world. It was aided in this effort by Israel's friendship with many Western European countries who were determined to prevent another Holocaust from happening to the Jewish people both in Europe and in the much-contested Middle East. However, the Mossad's biggest ally was the American Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA. The CIA provided training, equipment, and cash for the Mossad, as well as much vital information. However close these agencies and nations are, they both have one primary goal: the protection of their citizens, interests, and state. That means that, on occasion, there have been issues between the CIA and Mossad, most notably when Naval Intelligence Officer Jonathan Pollard was discovered to have passed U.S. secrets to the Israelis in the mid-1980s. The two agencies were again at odds during the 1956 Suez Crisis, when the Israelis, along with British and French paratroopers, seized the Suez Canal after threats by Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser. The US had warned all three countries not to take this action, which it believed would slow or halt a significant amount of world trade. The crisis ended with Israel achieving some of its aims, but not all, and it caused a temporary rupture between the US and the Jewish state. From 1949 to 1960, Mossad quietly went about its business, collecting information from around the world, but specifically its hostile Arab neighbors, all of whom vowed the destruction of the Jewish state. But it wasn't Mossad's spying and occasional actions against its neighbors that caught the attention of the entire world. It was the capture of the man they called the architect of the Holocaust, former Nazi SS officer Adolf Eichmann, who had been hiding rather openly in Argentina, a military dictatorship with a large German minority. Working for VW as Ricardo Clement, Eichmann, who had overseen the logistics of the Holocaust, felt rather safe and had been living in Argentina since 1950, after successfully eluding capture in Germany since 1945. Mossad agents had received tips that Eichmann was in Buenos Aires and sent a team to carry out what became the most famous operation in Mossad history. After watching their suspect for days and realizing he kept to a regular schedule, Mossad and Shin Bet agents grabbed Eichmann off the street, took him to a safe house, interrogated him, and then sedated him and smuggled him aboard an Israeli El Al Airlines plane back to Israel. There, the Nazi was tried in front of live TV cameras, and his trial was broadcast around the world. Found guilty of his crimes against humanity, Eichmann is the only man to be given the death sentence in an Israeli court. After Eichmann's capture and trial, it wasn't only other intelligence agencies that knew of and respected Mossad, it was everybody, even citizens of countries hostile to Israel. After the capture and trial of Eichmann, Mossad continued to stun the world, though some of its actions were only discovered outside Israel after they happened. One of those are the heroic actions of Eli Cohen, a Jew born in Egypt in 1924 with an incredible knowledge of Arab culture and the language. Cohen and his family were dedicated Zionists and worked for an independent Israeli state before 1948. Cohen was recruited by Mossad in 1955 and was eventually sent to Syria in the hopes of becoming a double agent within Syrian military intelligence. Cohen led the life of a much-valued Syrian agent from 1961 to 1965, all the while supplying Israel with information not only on Syrian intentions, but Arab intentions in general. He was finally arrested by the Syrians, tortured, and hanged publicly in 1965. In 1972, a militant Palestinian organization called Black September, connected to the Palestinian Liberation Organization, or PLO, carried out an attack on the Israeli Olympic team in, of all places, Munich, Germany. The members of Black September and other militant Palestinian organizations carried out low-level guerrilla war and terrorist activities against Israel and Israeli citizens for both the establishment of Israel and the continued dispossession and oppression of their people by the Israeli government. The German police attempted a rescue operation, which went bad right from the beginning, and 11 members of the Israeli team were executed. 1 West German police officer and 5 Black September members were killed as well. 3 Palestinians were taken prisoner. In response to the Olympic massacre, Mossad carried out Operation Wrath of God, an operational name for the ages. Though it took years to carry out, the Wrath of God team, codenamed Bayonet, traveled the world in search of anyone tied to the Munich massacre in any way and killed them. With bombs planted in phone handsets, a commando operation in Lebanon which resulted in the deaths of 3 Palestinian terrorists, and 7 years later, the mastermind of the Munich operation in a car bombing. Unfortunately, an innocent man was killed in Norway, and Norwegian intelligence rounded up the Mossad agents responsible, which caused a temporary halt to the operation and much criticism of Israel, but revived it in 1979 when they planted the car bomb and killed Ali Hassan Salameh, aka the Red Prince. In 1976, Mossad agents provided vital intelligence to paratroopers of the IDF when they were sent to Entebbe, Uganda to rescue 103 hostages who had been on a plane that was hijacked by militant anti-Israel terrorists from both Palestine and a radical leftist German organization. The raid was a spectacular success, made headlines all over the world, and once again brought Mossad into the public consciousness. Mossad rarely acknowledges its involvement in operations, even when it is obvious to the entire world who is responsible. One such case was the delivering of the Stuxnet worm into the computer systems controlling the Iranian centrifuges in the country's operation to develop a nuclear weapon. Most people believe that the operation was a joint Mossad-CIA effort against a country that both consider a dangerous enemy. It's believed that the infection of the Iranian computer systems set that country's efforts back by years. In 1996, Shin Bet and Mossad killed the chief bomb maker of Hamas, another militant Palestinian organization. Yahya Ayyash was killed after the Israelis infiltrated his circle of friends and family and planted a cell phone packed with the powerful explosive RDX that they were sure Ayyash would use. When they called and he identified himself, someone pushed a button, and Ayyash had his head blown off. In 2010, Mahmoud al-Mabhouh, co-founder of Hamas, was killed in Dubai by Mossad agents that took control of his computerized hotel room door and waited for him to return. When he did, they injected him with a paralyzing agent, electrocuted him into unconsciousness, and then smothered him with a pillow. Mossad never took credit for the operation, and the suspects were never caught, but no one in the intelligence world has any doubt who did it. The list of Mossad assassinations is long, and though some operations have failed, they have usually only been temporary failures. In 2016, Israeli reporters dropped a bombshell. Mossad had been running the infamous Nazi commando Otto Skorzeny, who had escaped U.S. custody in Germany in an audacious escape. Skorzeny, Hitler's commando and once considered the most dangerous man in Europe by the Allies, was given a choice by Mossad: carry out an operation or two for us, or die. It is thought that Skorzeny killed a former Nazi rocket scientist working for Israel's then enemy Egypt in 1962. Other deaths attributed to Skorzeny and Mossad have never proven, but are strongly suspected. This is History on Fleek, and we'll see you next time.